bring in Matt George, a guy who's also very familiar with Ken Rudolph. We did make Matt's life pretty miserable during the early stages of the lowdown where Matt George was our producer. and there were, if Ken didn't want to kill him, I wanted to kill him. Like somebody for 5 days of the week, like someone wanted to kill Matt, whether it was me or whether it was Ken. Someone wanted Matt's head.
And 5 out of 5 days, it was deserved. I missed that show, man. I had so much fun in my own weird way on that show, but that was one of my first ever like real gigs in radio. So that y'all had to deal with a rookie.
Oh, that's all right, man. We had fun, and that's all right. That's all right. I did that. See, I told you we put sound in the soundboard to pop each other, and I can't even tell one. That's all right. That's all right. Hey, you got to start somewhere, man. You did a great job, and look where you are here. You've built the Locked On Kings podcast empire.
That can't believe.
Oh no, it's there forever. And you had an episode recently that caught my attention a couple of days ago. You were talking about Alvin Gentry, and I should have looked up the exact title because I think in my head it was like Alvin Gentry is wasting the Kings' time.
Spot on.
Matthew, explain yourself.
And I admitted right at the beginning of the podcast that the title sounds a lot harsher than my actual point was. But I mean, to put it bluntly, I do believe to some extent Alvin Gentry is wasting the Kings' time in the sense that I think the Kings should be using this time to pick and choose the players that we're fairly confident, if not very confident, are going to be around, put them on the floor together and see what you got. And I understand, like, and I'm totally sympathetic to the position that Alvin Gentry's in, because Gentry's trying to keep this job. Like, Gentry's trying to go from associate to head coach. He's trying to be around next season. And while I don't think there's much of a chance in hell of that happening, unless the Kings go on some miracle winning run, which is what Gentry is ultimately coaching for, like, even then, I don't even know if he makes it. So I understand Gentry's position, what Gentry is trying to do. But in reality, like, to me, even if Justin Holiday's on the second or has another year on his contract next year, like that spot should be Davion Mitchell or Dante DiVincenzo. I think the other night, Dante DiVincenzo played 13 minutes. Like that can't happen. I get that like he was having a rough game and it was for matchup purposes. I don't care. Like the likelihood of this team actually making the playoffs is significantly low. And maybe starting Davion Mitchell next to De'Aaron Fox leads to a few more losses maybe than Justin Holiday, but they're not exactly winning right now. And Justin's not playing the best right now. And the other name that I brought up, even though I thought he's been playing pretty well, is I'm blanking. He's been starting at the 4 spot recently.
Trey Lyles.
Wow.
Trey Lyles. Thank you. I almost said Trey Lance.
Forward.
Yeah. And like, I get
and he's
you have
power forward of the future right there.
You have no depth at that position. And I mean, I would rather, even if we're not the biggest fan of it, I would rather see the Kings move Harrison Barnes to that position and have DiVincenzo and Davion Mitchell playing 2 and 3 in some capacity. I just want to see the group of players that I believe are going to actually be a part of this team next year playing together and playing big minutes for the remainder of the season. Treat it like an early training camp. I understand why Gentry's not, though.
Yeah, and Matt, to that point, yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Like, use this as an opportunity to see what works, because what's going on right now doesn't work, right? Like, even if you want to keep your job, even if you want to make a good impression, you're not going to make a good impression, at least to me, by doing the same thing that continues not to work. It's the same thing that we talk about with Luke Walton, or we talked about before the trade deadline. Stop trotting out the same losing starting lineup night in and night out, the same starting lineup that doesn't play any defense. Put guys in different positions. Maybe you got the right personnel or the right people playing, but you don't have them in the right roles. And I just want to see Alvin give us a look of, like you said, DiVincenzo or Davion starting at the 2. I don't necessarily I wouldn't go that route as far as putting Harrison at the 4, but hell, go ahead, try it. See if that combination brings something else to life. But continuing to put Justin, I'm even going to install him out, putting Justin in a bad spot, having him at the starting 2 guard every night to be in a role that he's probably not capable of executing at a high level on a nightly basis. That's not helping anybody.
Yeah, my feeling is, as much as I actually like Justin, I do like his game, and I think he can be a valuable role player for this team off the bench next year. If Justin Holiday's your starting 2 next season, I question how much better you got. Like, even if you significantly upgrade the 4, like the 2 guard spot is an extremely important spot or position in the NBA. And if Justin Holiday is your starting 2, like on 28 other teams, I won't say 29, but 28 other teams, he's probably not in that spot, especially teams that are having playoff, not just hopes, but expectations at that point in time. And there's still a question mark for me with DiVincenzo and Davion Mitchell. And that's my ultimate point is, can you answer that question? Like, we got a stretch of when Fox was out, Mitchell and Halliburton were playing together, and Mitchell was playing his best basketball offensively. Defensively, he's been pretty consistent, but offensively, he was showing, okay, he's got game a little bit. Since then, he's had moments, but it hasn't been nearly as consistent. I want to see if he can be that way next to Fox, because there's no reason to me why Davion Mitchell can't. And maybe this isn't the best comparison, but like I envision like if Davion Mitchell is your starting 2, it's like a Tony Allen type role, where he can score a little bit, but he's mainly out there to be your lockdown defender. Now, of course, he's a bit undersized compared to Tony Allen, but that's like what I envision in that situation. Or is Dante DiVincenzo in that spot? You traded for Dante DiVincenzo with the expectation that you're going to re-sign him. I don't know why the Kings wouldn't re-sign him this year. He is a restricted free agent, so unless he gets a ridiculous offer elsewhere, which I don't think he's going to get, are you re-signing him and paying him with the expectation that he's going to be a 6th man, or do you think he can be your starting 2? Or do you get enough information from starting both of them, realizing neither of them are good enough, and maybe you use one of them in a trade to go out and get yourself a starting 2 guard this offseason? Like, this is time that you can use to try and answer those questions now, instead of trying to appease a coach who has a wish upon a star chance of actually staying here in Sacramento. And I'm trying not to be disrespectful to Gentry. I don't know if it would be in the best interest of Monty McNair to go down to Gentry's office, knock on the door and say, hey, this is the lineup you need to put out there, because I know that's not the greatest thing to do on the planet. But I mean, I just rather see the Kings better use their time with some of these guys rather than keep trotting out what we're seeing and hoping.
Well, I think the interesting thing about that is, and I think it's what you're doing isn't working. It's not like you're advocating for whether it's Dante DiVincenzo or Davion Mitchell to start next to De'Aaron Fox, and Justin Holiday is just lighting the floor up every night. Like, Justin Holiday has not played particularly well. And even though his, minutes, I think he played less than 10 minutes or around 10 minutes on Saturday. Start Davion. Start Dante. See what it looks like. Like, give it a run. If Justin Holiday was, playing out of his mind, then it's like, all right, like let it rock. See what you got here. But I'm with you in the sense of constantly trying to figure out, what you have in this group. And Matt, I think one of the funniest things that Kenny and I talk about is Alvin has tinkered with the lineup repeatedly all year, much to the head scratching of the Sacramento Kings fans. But he won't take Justin Holiday out of that 2 spot since he got here. He won't give Dante that run or Davion Mitchell that run. And we've asked ourselves that question. We've asked James Ham that question. It's an answer we just can't seem to get.
Another question mark that I have with the rotations of Alvin Gentry is just how, like, just the rise and fall in so many ways of Mo Harkless, like, to the sense that he had a significant role with this team under Luke Walton. As soon as Gentry came in, his role diminished. And then there was like a 1 to 2 week period where he was back to playing consistent minutes a night, sometimes as a starter, mostly as a rotation player. And now he's back to not seeing the floor, period. And he's another guy that you have under contract next year. He's owed $4.5 million next year. So he's a guy, unless you trade him this offseason, he's more than likely going to be around. Like, honestly, the biggest thing with me, and I've thought about this more recently, and it's gotten me unnecessarily frustrated, or more frustrated than I can be. And I know you guys have talked about this too. Like, I think it's a big letdown for sure, but I also think it could have made the Kings approach a lot different to this offseason if we were seeing Terrence Davis with this group right now. Like, I just want to know, like, could Terrence Davis be that starting 2 guard? Because we know that he's been up and down as well. He hasn't been consistent. Nobody really on this team has been all that consistent this season. But Terrence Davis showed flashes of being that 2 guard that could at least be competent on the defensive end, that did stretch the floor. So that's another question mark that you have to address this offseason. And we haven't even seen him play with this new group yet. So Like, if you have some questions that you can try to answer here for the remainder of the regular season, try and answer them, or at least give yourself a little more information. Don't just wait till training camp.
Yeah, I agree. And when you talk about Terrence Davis, we talked about it a number of different times on here. Unfortunately for Monty, unfortunately for Terrence Davis, I feel like you got to go into the offseason saying, hey, Terrence Davis isn't the answer, so we need to upgrade from that position. You know what I mean? And that's the way you got to approach that shooting guard position. I wanted to get your opinion. I mean, maybe this is not a big deal at all, but, you know, I noticed it. Damian noticed it. Another head scratcher. Rashawn Holmes on Saturday night, for whatever reason, didn't start. I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't start Rashawn Holmes. He started for 2 years for this team, and Sabonis is out last minute. Why not start Rashawn Holmes? Do you have any idea of maybe what Alvin was thinking with that situation?
I think it had a lot to do with the fact that Rashawn has been so in and out of the lineup recently, to where he came back for a game and then was out again for personal issues after he was dealing with the amount of injuries and issues that he's dealt with all season long. So in reality, whether it's been practice time or on the floor time, Rashawn Holmes hasn't spent nearly as much time on the floor with this group as Damian Jones has. And I'm A-okay. As big of a fan I am that I am of Rashawn Holmes, and I want to make something perfectly clear too. Even though Rashawn got paid and he hasn't been the Holmes this season that we've seen in the past couple of seasons, I still think he's a bargain contract in the NBA, and I think he's going to have a ton of value this offseason. I have to be careful saying a ton because he's not going to warrant or like get you a massive prize back. But if Monty were to pair their first round pick this year with Rashawn Holmes, I imagine that there could be some significant interest in that, and you could get a pretty nice haul back in return. I have no idea. So I'm still a massive fan of Rashawn, and I feel so bad for him because this has been just a roller coaster, horrific year for him that I'm confident that he's going to be able to overcome. That being said, I have more faith at this point in time in Damian Jones because I've seen him on the floor more consistently. And Jones, to me, just gives you the same thing on a nightly basis. Even if sometimes his scoring numbers may be better than other nights, like I know what I'm getting out of Damian Jones, just like over the last 2 years, I knew every single night what I was getting from Rashawn. At this point in time, I don't know because he hasn't been on the floor that much. So I'm okay with that decision by Monty, Alvin. Plus, Damian Jones is another one of those guys where I wouldn't mind seeing him back on this roster next season. So maybe this is his chance to showcase and see if he has a shot at being a rotational bench big. And I think he does have a legitimate shot.
You're listening to D'Lo and KC on ESPN 1320 KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by Lasher's Elk Grove Dodge. Matt George, his baby and his bird join us here.
Not my baby. That was my cat.
Oh my God, that was a cat.
That was a cat.
Did the cat get the bird? Because the bird has stopped chirping.
I wish every day that happens. Every
Oh
single
my
day.
goodness.
I just can't find the evilness to open the cage up. But sometimes, man,
You don't mean that. You don't. You'd be devastated.
own a bird. Own a bird, and you'll
Well,
realize.
no, like why would I own a bird?
No.
Can you stay at your house just for a week? Just give it a
No,
shot. Come on.
absolutely no, Matthew. No, absolutely not.
Worth a shot.
You mentioned Mo Harkless there a few minutes ago and wanting to get a look at him. Like Mo, I think it was, I was surprised to see him play the other day, but he, as James Ham told us, had been pretty beat up over the course of the last few weeks, and it'll be interesting to see what his role is moving forward. And, you know, it didn't really dawn on me. The Kings have lost 4 in a row. Like the Kings they're losing a ton of games. Like this season is just sputtering to just a frustrating end. And I'm curious what the approach will be from Alvin Gentry moving forward. Now, I understand Alvin Gentry has a job that he is essentially fighting for, but I also we've got Jeremy Lamb, who played 13 minutes. He's out for personal reasons. We know Domantas Sabonis missed the game for personal reasons the other night. It looks like he's back. I mean, I do wonder if we start seeing Neemias Queta. Like, I don't know that there's any real reason to play Josh Jackson. I don't envision him as a Sacramento King next year, but there's not a lot of changes you can make because most of the guys are already playing. I mean, Alex Lynn is under contract. I don't know what you do with that next year, but I don't know that there are a ton of changes Alvin can make moving forward. Unless you just talk about minute distribution and that just completely gets slanted in one way.
Yeah, if you're giving guys looks, like I would love to see more of Neemias Queta and see extended stretches of him on the floor, because just in terms of size and shot blocking, he could help this team, I think, significantly with one of their major weaknesses. But there's a reason why he's a second round pick. There's a reason why he's a G League player. I'm not expecting him to come in and suddenly steal the show necessarily. But I mean, if you want to give him a look here at the end of the season in garbage time, absolutely. The only thing that I press the brakes on a little bit, and I understand that towards the end of the season on a losing team, hell, even on winning teams that have playoff spots locked up, you want to try and save your stars a little bit, and you want to make sure that they don't go out there and risk unnecessary injury. I understand that argument completely, and it always sucks when a player goes down in a meaningless game. That being said, like, just as much as this is time for the Kings to see what they have in these role players with the team next year, it's still time to see what you have in Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And I want to see the two of them playing together. Now, does it have to be 35, 40 minutes a night, like what they're probably going to be playing next season? No, not necessarily. But if the Kings start playing one and sitting the other, essentially a tanking type move, which I hope they don't do, I think that's also partially wasting time. Like, you're pretty confident. I think we're all pretty confident that those two are going to still be together. And I think we've gotten the gist of, at least on paper, what you can get out of the two of them. But I want to see on-court chemistry growing. I want to see, like, we've seen flashes, we've seen moments. I want to see that consistently starting tonight, assuming Sabonis is back. So I would be hesitant to give others minutes when you're sacrificing significant minutes out of those two. You don't have to play them max starter minutes on a nightly basis, like you're in the race, like you're in the hunt, but make sure they're getting significant court time together still, and you're seeing what you got.
How do you feel about De'Aaron Fox's recent play? And I asked that because, we were talking to Ken Rudolph before you came on, and he's not alone in having the thoughts of, these are meaningless stats. These are meaningless numbers, empty calories that Fox has been putting up because they're not resulting in wins. I disagree. I understand that at some point you got to start winning games, but I also think he's playing really well, and he is, in my opinion, doing his part to get this team to a point where they're competitive in these games. He just hasn't been able to bring it home. How do you see the recent play by Fox?
There's one stat in particular, Kenny, that makes all the difference for me when it comes to De'Aaron. And it's not like his three-point shooting percentage, which I know a lot of people are paying attention to. And over the last 10 games, I think he's shooting like 39, 40% from three, which is phenomenal. And we've seen what he's able to do as a scorer. And we all know that he's capable of doing that. And in these games without Sabonis, he has to do that. So I'm thankful that he's stepping up in that way. But the big number, the big difference for me is in four out of these last 8 games, I believe, De'Aaron Fox has had 10 or more assists. What that tells me is that Fox is still getting his teammates involved and they're still losing, meaning he needs more help. If De'Aaron Fox is giving you a 40 plus 10 plus point 10 plus assist game, what more can you ask out of the guy other than maybe he scores 50? And defense, I can always ask questions of De'Aaron Fox defensively. So that I kind of put in a drawer and tuck away a little bit. Not that I'm making an excuse for him. He needs to get better defensively. And that goes back to the conversation that we had last week, which is play this way from day one, De'Aaron, and play with effort defensively from day one. Don't just wait to the fourth quarter when you really need to get a stop. Like, play that so you don't have to worry about getting a stop in the fourth quarter. But that's a different conversation. I think what we're seeing out of De'Aaron Fox, I think it's totally unfair to call them empty stats. If he was scoring 35 a night with just one assist and he was clearly not moving the ball and he was taking 30 plus shots, then I'm like, okay, he's just recognizing he's on a bad team and he's just trying to go out there and put up numbers. He's trying to be, sorry, Damian, he's trying to be Russell Westbrook in some ways.
Why couldn't you say Ricky Davis? There's no need to keep going to Westbrook.
Okay, Ricky Davis, that's fair. Ricky Davis. So, I mean, I think calling what Fox has been doing recently empty stats it's significantly unfair.
Refresh my memory, prior to this year's LeBron James-led Los Angeles Lakers team, what bad team did Russell Westbrook play on? Because when y'all wrote off the Oklahoma City Thunder, he won the MVP that year and dragged that team to the playoffs, right?
And I was captain Russell Westbrook that year, by the way. I was making sure he was getting that MVP nod over James Harden all the way. So
don't clean it up now, pal.
I think we got to go to commercial. We got to go to commercial. James, I'm coming on.
Don't try to get out of this now.
I'm coming, Mom.
We keep talking about needing more help. I feel like all we're talking about is defense. De'Aaron needs help on the defensive end, and I'm not absolving him of his defensive flaws. He certainly has them, and I've taken my L's repping for De'Aaron on the defensive end. But one thing that's confused us, Matt, is how there's been somewhat of a roster turnover, certainly in the starting position. Three different players starting the other night, and this team is equally as bad, if not worse, than they were defensively to start the year.
And it's especially bad with perimeter defense. Like, I know the Kings are in need of a shot blocker. If you could somehow build the ideal four for this Kings team to find, it's a four that protects the rim and spaces the floor. Like, that would be the absolute perfect situation for the Kings to find at that four spot to play alongside Sabonis. And those are important traits. But the Kings overall have to get better with their perimeter defense. And it doesn't just start with better on-ball defense. It starts with having enough of a defensive identity to where you don't get games like what Jordan Clarkson did to them the other night. And Clarkson is on a long list of players who either come in on a slump, or how many young players, and I'm not trying to disrespect Clarkson here because he's a really solid player and he's been a great get for the Utah Jazz. But Clarkson came into that game, and shooting wise, he was in a slump. Like, he was struggling shooting the basketball, but he, like, at least one, but probably an entire roster of players comes into a game against the Sacramento Kings and goes, oh yeah, I'm going to get mine tonight. I'm going to get my opportunity. Like, I'm going to get my chance to shine. And that breeds confidence. And we know how important confidence is with a shooter. Like, how many times Jason Jones used to make it a nightly joke, and he's 100% right. Like, who is going to be the guy to get his career high that nobody's heard about? Like, it happens all the time, whether it's in Sacramento or on the road, it doesn't matter. And Clarkson was the next guy to go, hey, I'm shooting the ball bad, but hey, this is an opportunity at home against the Sacramento Kings. And he had confidence from the jump. For a guy that is in a cold stretch, to have that kind of confidence and to drop 45 or whatever he had, like that to me is, it's not just the Kings need to play better on ball defense. The Kings need to establish enough of a defensive identity to where their opponents don't come in with the confidence that they're playing basically a pickup game, and it's going to be like rookie mode on NBA 2K, because that's what I see nightly.
Hassan Whiteside had 21 rebounds in that game.
Man,
played 35 minutes.
Who's going to take it from him?
Man,
goodness gracious, man. That is just brutal. Absolutely brutal. Yeah, 45 points on 15 of 21 shooting, 7 of 13, 8 of 8 from the free throw line for Jordan Clarkson in that game on Saturday. And oh, by the way, DeMar DeRozan and the Chicago Bulls are in town tonight.
So excited. So excited.
That'll be fun. We'll talk more about that. Matt George, host of the Locked On Kings podcast tonight after the game. As always, Matt, we appreciate you. My friend Matt, of course, with us along with his bird and his cat every Monday here on Dealing